Welcome, Jesse and Leo. Thank you so much for joining us at Zoo Chat, zuzalu.city's podcast. We're really excited to welcome Maitri to talk about what you've been working on, and especially with community graphs for zuzalu.city.
Thanks for having us.
If we could get started with just an introduction. What is Maitri Network? Why are you working on this? What is the story?
Yeah, at a high level, I could answer both of those questions. Maybe what it is first and why we're working on it second. Maitri is basically an effort to help decentralize social media in a manner that's really complementary and not competitive with all the other efforts to do similar things. We're approaching it a little bit differently, more as a coordination problem. Instead of building another Facebook to disrupt Facebook or one of the many Twitter clones. What we're doing is we're focused on incentivizing interoperability across interoperable social media applications and protocols to create a shared network effect. That's really our main focus. The idea is to bring together all the small numbers of users that are splintered across hundreds of different social media applications to create a larger number of users that can together present a more meaningful competitive threat to the monopolies. And as to why we're working on that, Leo and I have been really close friends for about a decade. He's one of the people I most enjoy talking about. Well, much more governance than politics. Like what's happening in between the times people vote for politicians in this country. And he was really early to see the importance of journalists getting canceled. I think that's a result of him being a Bosnian War refugee. He came to this country, his family came to this country at 11 years old after seeing his country galvanized to go to civil war based largely on state-run propaganda. So when he flagged this, we started talking about it, and he proposed to me a mechanism design that seemed very complementary to the efforts that I was just describing, all the other social media applications and protocols, in a way that really became kind of a moral compulsion for us to come together to do this.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing the context and also hearing a bit about the reality that's pushing towards needing things like this. I think a good number of people working on different projects within the Zuzalu ecosystem do have personal stakes in it, or at least understand how important and how quickly personal stakes can be involved. So you've talked a bit about the overview of the interoperability of social media and why you need this. What if you had to answer the question what we want from social media, what would you say the ideal solution would be?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one, Veronica. So the way I think about it is what we want ideally out of if we step back and think about what do we want ideally out of social media. First, we would want interoperability so that we can combine network effects of all these different Web3 protocols, like Jesse was talking about, whether it's Lens or Farcaster or Blue Sky, as well as a bunch of other Web2 solutions. Like let them all coexist, and let's not prescribe one solution, but let's all join forces, because by doing that, we have a much better shot at beating the Web2 model of these monopolies in this winner-take-all market. So that's the first thing we want, and part of that would also be how do you then let users easily navigate between all of these in one place? Because if you want to scale to many different applications and many different clients and different protocols, it becomes a lot of friction to try to move between these. So how do you solve that friction point? And then in addition to that, ideally, we also want to create new use cases for social media and new social coordination tools that don't exist today. And that's what we're here mainly talk about how we're enabling that with one layer that we're building, which is called community graphs, which is a way of mapping group memberships. It's a way to augment social graphs by also saying, let's map memberships to groups and the extent of people's involvement in that groups to create a bunch of new social coordination tools, and allow us to create much better experiences in social media than with just social graphs. And so ideally we put all those together, and that really gives us the best shot of creating something new that users are really going to love.
Absolutely wonderful. And I think one reason it's especially meaningful that we're combining efforts at zuzalu.city and Maitri is I think we're really moving in the same direction with the same mission of how can you have things more in not a centralized manner, but at least in a central focal point that it's easier. So you're not trying to onboard everybody differently, but rather you have it all in an interoperable place that then is moving in that right direction. But let's dive in then more to the trust and reputation systems that you mentioned, since Community Graph is the first piece that you're establishing along with zuzalu.city. Can you talk more about that, please?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we'll be piloting at zuvillage, Georgia, is the very first iteration of community graphs, and that's what we're really excited to roll out, because it allows us to do a lot of cool things. With community graphs, you can allow members of any group to attest to the level of involvement of everyone else in that group, so that you end up with these membership levels that exist on a continuum rather than you're in a group, you're out of a group. It's like, how central of a part of that group are you? And that allows us to have much higher quality level of interactions. It allows us to have gated access. If you have a higher level of membership, maybe you have a write access to a forum instead of a read access, or maybe you have a moderator access level, or you have access to certain events. It allows us to improve community governance in a way that maintains the ethos of that group and the values of that group, especially as that group grows. And it could be that people, how do you grow that group? Who's allowed to invite people to that group? It might be that people who are more central members of that group get more invites, right? Because they're better stewards of the values of that group. And you can have much better group governance. That people who are more central to a group have more of a say over, what the group does or what events it does, and so on. And like you just alluded to, you can build much more robust and scalable reputation systems. Because when we think about how reputation works, we build trust and credibility inside of communities, and then that carries across to other communities through overlapping memberships. And so really, reputation is the key to the way that we coordinate socially, and communities are the key to reputation. And by having community mapping, we can have much farther reach. We can have much better reputation systems and much farther reach of those reputation systems, because now you can go a lot further in your social graphs. And even communities themselves can have reputation, and they can use that reputation to vouch for their members. So even when you're joining new communities that have no overlapping memberships, well, now your existing communities can vouch for your reputation, and you don't have to start from scratch. And so now you can have truly scalable reputation systems on a global level that are also decentralized. Jesse, I don't know if you want to add some more to that.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of context as to why we started working on this, as it really was rooted in Zuzalu and conversations around the future of Zuzalu in Istanbul, where we participated in ZooConnect. There were many spirited conversations about the example that was made very frequently would be these aspirational statements of like, essentially it came down to balancing inclusivity and exclusivity. It would be how do we grow to the size of Burning Man in a way that's inclusive while maintaining the quality of this highly curated, intimate setting of 200 to 300 people at a time. And so it was that question about how we can steward the growth and management of a community while also maintaining quality and not diluting the culture. That's a classic problem, right? So that was what got us thinking along these lines, and Pooja's work in this area had been really inspirational. And Leo devised this mechanism, which we can talk about in a little bit more detail, which I think will be very helpful as it result in something that I think adds a whole nother dimension to other social coordination tools, things related to identity and social graphs and governance. There's many wonderful tools along those lines, but this narrow gap of how we map people's memberships in groups was under addressed.
Yeah, and maybe I can add a little bit of some examples there of things that really get unlocked by having robust and scalable reputation systems. So one immediate thing is social Sybil resistance, right? So the fact that once I have a reputation, I can stake that reputation to say, look, this is my unique account, and I'm a human being, and that creates Sybil resistance. And similarly, I can also stake that reputation to say, I'm not going to try to game certain online voting systems or certain public funding goods mechanisms like quadratic funding, I'm going to follow the rules, and I'm staking my reputation on that, and I have a reputation for that. So that can really help create collusion resistance as well, because Sybil resistance and collusion resistance are ultimately two sides of the same coin. And then beyond that, you can really have uncollateralized lending, like have a reputation for paying money back. You can have reputation-based expertise, right? So I'm an expert in a certain area that can be used to also improve prediction markets, right? Because now you can have people who are experts in a certain area help make predictions in that area, and their voice counts more than the average person. One example I give is like I think we all know the plane on a treadmill kind of question. Like if you have a plane on a treadmill and the treadmill is always going to match the wheels of that plane, will it ever take off? And people really get spun up on that. But if you if you have a bunch of people who have expertise in engineering and physics, and you weight their opinions more, you're much more likely to get the right answer. So and so that's just one example of like how do you make better predictions in prediction markets if you weight the opinions of people who have expertise in that area. And so there's a lot of things that get unlocked there by having reputation systems that don't exist today.
And before we move on, it might be helpful to talk about how we're doing this instead of just leaving it at the level of giving attestations. It really is the combination of a couple well-known concepts that makes this work in a way that we think will be really meaningful. So the basic concept is that we're going to apply quadratic voting to the concepts around web of trust in order to mitigate for some of the shortcomings of a pure vouching model. So if there were a lot of conversations about incorporating vouching into Zuzalu in order to grow the community. But the issue that we've seen over the last number of decades, especially going back as far to the early PGP experiments, is that vouching can lead to a self-reinforcing kind of a mechanism where you vouch people in, and then they vouch downstream of you, and a small group of people can wrestle control over a larger group of people in a way that can lead to predictably bad outcomes for the larger group. So we intend to mitigate for this by applying quadratic voting so that you have minimum distance between you and the person whose membership level you're attesting to, and ideally maximum distance from multiple people attesting to the same person.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of the context. And I know you did mention there's a gap here, and you've already given some examples of previous attempts at it. But before we dive into the details of what you're really building with community graphs at the moment and planning on doing with it, I'm curious if you could talk about examples of how trust works offline or in Web 2, or what does exist. So there's a gap in having something that's going to be, of course, when it comes to quadratic voting and anything that's beyond what's already been tested. But there are forms of attestation that do exist, and maybe there are even projects that are not Web3 aligned, but are trying to do something along those lines. And where are those pitfalls, and how are you guys solving that?
Yeah, I can tell you who we've been talking to and what this adds to those projects. Much in the same way as Maitri being complementary to other social media projects. This is something where I wouldn't say that this is a better solution than anything around identity or attestation protocols or projects. It really is just, it's complementary in the way that it sits alongside those. It's adjacent to identity and attestation and governance tooling. Then our narrow focus is, like we've said, mapping membership in groups. So if you have something like Passport or the HATS protocol or EAS or Coordinate, these are all really valuable in their own respect. And mapping people's memberships in groups and the way that they move between them just adds another dimension and a lot more context.
Yeah, so just to build a little bit on what Jesse said there, really we view ourselves as another layer to these things. There's a lot of identity mechanisms and solutions out there, a lot of reputation solutions as well. And by also adding group membership to this, the community graphs is built to be fully modular and composable. And so as a community, you can use different identity systems and stack those on top of one another for an even stronger signal. And you could say, to be a part of this community, you need this kind of identity or this kind of identity, or a combination of these three to even enter as a member of a community. Because some communities have a more of a need for Sybil resistance than others. Some of them might be okay with it. Hey, if a few Sybil accounts or a few duplicate accounts get in, we're okay with it. And some other communities might say, no, it's absolutely important. So you need multiple identity systems to really. And so it's really integrating with all of those and interoperating with all of them, and each community being able to choose which ones they allow in and how they weight those. And similarly with reputation systems. And so you can plug in your identity systems, reputation systems, and you can also write your own algorithms and mechanisms within community graphs and have other communities use those. So if you want to write a new reputation system where people are vouching for one another in one way, you can write that and have that be used by your community and by other communities if you wish. So it's really around, let's experiment with all sorts of different solutions and play around with these things and see what works best.
And a practical example of that that's close to home we can all relate to is a forum like Zuzagora, talking about what are Zuzalu aligned events, right? These are conversations that the community is going to have more and more frequently, looking forward into the future, and taking even like non-binding sentiment analysis from within the Zuzalu community can really indicate like where there is broad support and where ideas diverge about what is or is not aligned.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Let's go ahead and dive in to what you're building at the moment with community graphs, how this connects to zuzalu.city and the upcoming Zoo Village.
Yeah, sure. So for our pilot, it's really going to be an alpha, which is the very first iteration here. And so as people attend Zoo Village, Georgia, everyone who attends will be allowed to use community graphs. And within that, there's going to be some predefined communities that will be created by the organizers, and those will pertain to specific talk tracks or specific themes. And anyone will be able to join those communities and be part of those. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the functionality that comes with that. And then on top of that, anyone will also be able to build, start their own community and choose who they invite to that community and how they invite people. And once you're in a community, people will be able to attest for one another's level of membership. And the UI for that is really going to be just, if you imagine, there's 15 people in a certain group or community, and they're all down the line, and each one has a little slider. And so you just do these little sliders, kind of approximations of like, hey, who's more involved with this group and who isn't. And then that gets put into the calculation, and there's an algorithm there around, like Jesse was saying, that really is combining Web of Trust with quadratic voting, and then calculates everybody's membership level based on those attestations. So everyone ends up with a membership level between 0 and 100%. And then what we're really interested in is what people do with that stuff. And what we'll be starting with is some very basic functionality. Like every community will automatically get their own private Telegram group, and they'll also get some basic polling / voting functionality where anyone can create a poll. And we want to start with some really low stakes stuff, right? Because we're not sure how well this algorithm will work, and we don't want people getting upset and having a kind of adverse impact. But it could be something as simple as, hey, where do we all want to go for dinner tonight? Or what do we all want to do? And let's just play around with it and have fun with it, and see what people's responses are, and see how we can improve on these things. And so that's really kind of the basic, sort of essentials. And then from there, anyone that wants to build on community graphs, basically to pool for these membership levels into their own application and their own tooling to provide to these groups, they'll be able to do that. And obviously each group will have to give an application the permissions to actually see the membership levels or to retrieve those, who the members are in the membership levels. But from there, anyone that wants to build on top of this, whether it's any kind of forums or any other kind of tooling, they'll be able to do so, and we're excited to see what builders will come up with.
And if I could just, I'd like to just explain a little bit why we're taking this particular approach, and that is to say that we're really good at sense making and quickly assessing kind of social dynamics within a group, even that we've entered very recently. So we're attending Edge Esmeralda right now, and in explaining to people what we're working on, we're all, we're around so many interesting people learning about the different projects that we're each working on. I've been talking to folks about, as they come into a community like this, how quickly are they able to assess, like, who do you think the organizers are, the core contributors? Who seems familiar with more people, like they might have participated in other Edge events or Zuzalu events, or who might have just arrived. And in conversation with people about that, it's incredible how quickly we can assess things like that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to represent this, as Leo was explaining, along more of a continuum than a binary manner that people are currently represented as in something like the spreadsheets that we're all so familiar with. It gives us a lot more context, and I think that's tremendous. That's tremendously valuable. But the other thing that I'd like to highlight is the sliders that Leo was describing. That's really deliberate in effort to avoid trying to represent people as numbers in any way that they start to associate, as a social credit score. That's the reason why we're trying to start with something that's more like a shoot from the hip, quick vibe check, and on the back end, that's converted to precise math that we can compute to achieve things, and then turn that back into something that for users is again represented as, more like a heat map than a social credit score.
And one thing that is really worth mentioning that I forgot to mention is any attestations that anyone makes are fully private, only to themselves. So nobody can see who attested for them, or how, and that's really important to get honest assessments out of people rather than social pressure influencing these things.
Thank you. Yeah, I did want to ask about privacy, and we're really excited to experiment with this, explore it during ZooVillage, though we'll have to ask to use status groups if that's possible. We can discuss that. So finally, I'd love to hear more about the long-term vision of incorporating with the zuzalu.city infrastructure and all of the Zuzalu movement as however it grows after this year.
Yeah, and I'll kind of give an overview here, and Jesse can probably again fill in some more color. But our goal is to really get a lot of user feedback and see how people use these things during Zuzalu Georgia, and then from there, can we use this at incremental, additional Zuzalu villages like Zoo Switzerland or Switzerland and beyond that, and is there an opportunity to incorporate this within the greater Zuzalu community? Around, there's been a lot of discussions, both on the reputation side around, collusion resistance for quadratic funding rounds and so on, and also how does the Zuzalu community grow while maintaining its values, and is this something that can help it do that? Can it help again with the Zuzagora forums and how people get invited into those forums and who has access to post where and so on? So that's really kind of the greater question there of how can we help solve some of these problems? And it's really sort of a step-by-step iterative process of let's try something, see how it works, let's improve on it, and solve these problems one by one to the extent that we can. Anything you want to add there, Jesse?
Yeah, I would just say that thematically, I mean, the thing that we're doing is we're bringing different social media applications and protocols together, and that's our main focus. And within the Zuzalu community, like I know that zuzalu.city is going to end up anchoring a lot of these things in one place. What will be really complementary to that is that from within Maitri, we can actually access all of those applications and different projects that people are working at, hackathons and zoo villages, in one place and sharing network effects. So you'll be able to access not just all the applications, but all the people across those applications that want, that with modular composability and optionality between them. That's really powerful, because I talked to people, for instance, about something that's been posted on a Zuzagora forum recently. and it's incredible how often people don't know about that it even exists. You know, I don't know what percentage of Zuzalu people that have attended a Zuzalu event have signed up or are active on the Zuzagora forum, but I can tell you it's a lot high. It would be a lot higher if they knew that these places and tools existed. So we'd really like to help contribute in that way.
And there was also a question around infrastructure, and we started with privacy. And so I wanted to mention that it's really critical that this is decentralized while also being private. And that's something that is part of our roadmap. And where, you know, ultimately what you need is private data storage, or at least encrypted data storage, while also private computation, because if the computation is done publicly on a smart contract, then you can see the attestations coming in, who attested how, and the calculations coming out. And so for the data storage, we're in talks with Ceramic, and you know, we met with them, and in full partnership here to put this on Ceramic. One of the things that is going to be a gating factor for us is having these be access controlled. Not data not being fully permissionless, and so they are going to have access control that is on their roadmap for August of this summer. So we'll be able to put this data on Ceramic at that time. And then the private computation piece, we're considering a couple of options. One is private smart contracts with Aztec. They're looking at a Q1 go live for that on the mainnet. And there's also an option we're exploring with Lit protocol around using TDEs, trusted execution environments, to do private computation. So that's another option there that we're exploring. So, but that is kind of the infrastructure side of how do we make this fully private while being and decentralized at the same time.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. One final question: if there are people that are interested in hearing more or even getting involved with directly supporting Maitri and community graphs, where should they go?
Jesse?
You can find us at maitri.network. That's MAITRI.network.
Great. Thanks again. Really wonderful having you here, and really excited to continue collaborating and building together the future that we want to have.
Thanks, Veronica.
Thanks so much for having us.
Excited as well.
Thank you all. So thanks. So do we have any other questions or any things that I want to discuss? So 1, 2, 3. If not, let's wrap up the meeting and have a good day. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Actually, guys, when will you be there in Georgia? How long the duration? We could coordinate a little bit more with the.
So we'll be there the entire time, and two of our developers actually live in Georgia, less than an hour away. So we'll be bringing technical resources to help builders throughout the duration of See Georgia.
Thanks. Cool. Well, we'll try to be there longer time as well. Fantastic. Yeah.
Look forward to meeting everyone.
Awesome.
Good. Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys. Thanks.
Bye bye.